We welcome you into the Sporting Pod, along with Mauricio Ruiz. I'm Cole Pepper. Tony Allegretti is traveling. He may join us here as we record. I do want to point out that we will have one more episode here in 2024 that will come next week. And then we're going to take some time off for the holidays. We won't have a TV show, radio show, or a podcast for a couple of weeks, and we'll get back to it after the new year. So gives you plenty of time to catch up with all of the podcasts that you've missed, if you have missed any of them, between the start of our run here and the end of 2024. Today on the pod, we are reflecting back on 2024 and all of the moments that made up a building year for Sporting JAX. Also, surprises in the Champions League, who might be in trouble for the knockout round, and we look ahead to the weekend in the Premier League. We are fed by the Bearded Pig, locally owned and operated, with locations in San Marco and Jax Beach. Make sure you swing by the Bearded Pig for great barbecue and great times. And for those of you who are already ardent Sporting JAX supporters, hey, go to the Bearded Pig, show your support, wear some Sporting JAX gear in there, thank them for being some of our early sponsors with the Sporting Pod and with Sporting JAX. Chad, Michael, and the whole team over there are great supporters of what Sporting JAX is doing. So show them a little love here this holiday season. All right, let's look back on 2024. Next week on the podcast, we're going to look ahead to 2025. Tony will join us here in a bit. As I mentioned, Mauricio and I have been reflecting on the year on the Sporting JAX Soccer Hour on 1010XL and on the Sporting JAX Report on First Coast News, NBC 12. But as you look back, Mauricio, sometimes when you're in it, you don't necessarily understand or appreciate how much growth there has been in a year. But boy, this is a great time to look back and see how far we have come. When the year began, by the way, we had not opened up our offices to the public. So that's how far we've gone from basically... We had some offices, but they weren't really ready to be public, to now having two different offices. So just internally, as we talk about some of the background and behind-the-scenes stuff, that's a lot of growth for Sporting JAX.
It is, and you're talking about the office expansion. It also means that we had staffing expansion, so we needed to increase our space, our working space, because it was getting crowded in our original office down on Phillips Highway, so we had to move into a more corporate office as we increased ticketing staff and marketing staff and support in general. There's so many events this year that we've done, and we repeated some of them, like the High School Media Day. We repeated the Jaguar Soccer Clinic. We tried to add the Stateside Cup Clinic, but then it got rained out. It was a long day, but when I go around the community, I think the biggest growth that I see that we've claimed in 2024 is just awareness. There's an education, there's awareness that took in place in 2023 when we launched the brand, which is almost to the day, Cole. We're recording this December 12th. If I recall it correctly, I think we launched the brand December 12th.
I think that's
2023.
Right.
So happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you.
Sporting JAX. We went from JAX USL, which is a holding name, to Sporting Club Jacksonville.
By the way, the first anniversary traditional gift is paper. So, whatever you want to get me, it's fine.
That's
stationery,
that's fine.
anything else.
What are you, a medium?
Yeah,
okay.
in stationery, I am.
It's crazy to think that we're only a year away from the launch of our brand, of our colors, of our logo. And when you go out to the community, you actually see bumper stickers on cars. You see people wearing the shirts around a little bit. Obviously, it hasn't taken over the city just yet, and you won't until we really put that product on the field. But when you speak to folks around, at first there was a little bit of like, wait, what are you guys doing? Who are you? And now there's an excitement. There are questions and there's curiosity. So the awareness has certainly increased this past year.
There are still some questions that will need to be answered in the future. Some of those questions have been asked basically all year. Important questions like, where are you going to play? Well, we have a partial answer for that at UNF for the USL Super League inaugural season. Beyond that, stadium questions still to be answered in 2025. I also think one of the big things that we learned this year is sort of more about what the product on the field can look like, because 8 teams began the USL Super League the USL Championship has been ongoing, so we've known what that can look like. And if you had a chance to watch the USL Championship final in Colorado Springs, I mean, what a great scene that was with a stadium that's about half the size of what we are proposing in terms of capacity. 15,000 person capacity. Versus what was it? Is 8,100 or something?
Yeah, a little bit over 8,000 there.
In
great atmosphere, though.
Great atmosphere, of course. The altitude as well. We don't have the altitude to deal with, but just the atmosphere of that in a big game. But understanding what the Super League is going to look like and how it's going to play out, and how it can be better as well. I mean, one of the things that I really appreciate about the USL is that they take a stance of process improvement. And all right, now we've done it. They're about halfway through the USL Super League year. How do we do it better in the second half of the season that'll start in February? How do we do it better when the 2025-2026 season rolls around, when Jacksonville will enter into the league? And so that process improvement is something. I know that you, behind the scenes, you and Becky in particular, have been keeping an eye on what's happening with regard to the Super League and how that's going to impact player acquisition and finding that leadership on the technical side. And those conversations have to be much different now than they were this time last year.
Well, they were, because the product on the field now, there's evidence to it, and we have an idea of what it looks like and the quality of the league in general. And I think there were a lot of questions that people were wondering, how can the country sustain 2 women's professional leagues? And I think that's the wrong answer. It's like, why don't we have more than 14 teams in NWSL? I mean, look at the size of the country. We have 3-4 professional men's leagues. You're going to tell me that there are less women playing soccer than men. In fact, it's the opposite, because if you look at the college system, there are more women's college programs that are men due to Title IX and different reasons. So, yeah, we absolutely have room for currently 2 women's professional leagues, but you're still talking only about 20-something teams,
right,
compared to the men that have over 100 teams on all leagues combined. So there's plenty more room for expansion in both leagues. But the Super League starting point is significantly ahead of any other league for a couple of different reasons. First of all, they have a reference point in NWSL in the history of women's leagues and some of the mistakes and failures and successes as well. But also the Super League is, jumping with, and not on the shoulders in the sense that one is ahead of the other, but there's an infrastructure of the USL League that already operates several different products in the championship, League One, the USL 2, W League, USL Youth. So it's not like they're starting fresh. It's not a startup league in a more traditional way.
The business isn't a startup.
Correct.
The league specifically maybe, but there's a lot of infrastructure and institutional knowledge that goes into the USL front office.
And good practices, right? There's common practices that have already been put in place. So then the question was, what was the product on the field going to look like? And I think a lot of people are really impressed with the product on the field. There's still a lot of awareness and education that need to be done in each city. But Peacock hosting, the games on every single game on live stream was fantastic for the league. I think there's a lot of awareness that was placed when they made a deal with Peacock, and I think it's a really positive deal so far. So the product. So if you look at just the product and the conversation back to how are technical directors and coaches and players interested. Well, they saw that the product is not that far away from the NWSL. There's still some gaps in between the top players that are making significant amount of money and some top stars internationally as well. But the bunch of the NWSL and to the bottom of the rosters to the top of the Super League in its first year, the gap isn't that big.
Yeah, so they're talking with Becky as well. She's talked about the number of people who have reached out to her since the announcement that we had, 2 weeks ago now, about putting the first year at Hodges Stadium at UNF and coming into the league next year. I don't know how many incoming, unsolicited calls you were getting in January and February for that sort of thing, but I suspect that now that has completely changed.
Oh, absolutely. Some of those are kind of emerging again, but now I'm getting emails and calls and text messages from people that I didn't know saying, hey, I got your number from such and such, and here I'm interested in a position, or I'm interested in playing. So that's going to start up in 2025. We're in the final stages of hiring a technical director and a head coach on the women's side. So that to be announced early in 25 if everything kind of goes according to timing. And then the process of tryouts and looking at players and traveling and scouting for our technical staff will really begin in the first quarter of 25.
Looking back on 2024, what are the most memorable moments associated with Sporting JAX for you? What are the things that will stay in your mind as you think back to what this year was all about?
I think the eyes are gonna go to the professional team, right? So there's some of the announcements that we've made, but I'm a grassroots guy, right? I love what's happening when people aren't necessarily watching. And not that this wasn't publicized, but our high school media day, I think, is such a unique thing that, our local coaches came up with, and we were fortunate to be able to put it together for them. So looking at what it feels like now already, like an expected event, but only in its second year. We launched it last year. We kind of really built it as we were flying it on the day. Then we took some feedback, and we have good partners at the YMCA at Riverside downtown that were able to host it. But it's almost becoming too small of a venue to host it there again. We'll still continue to work with them, but the event became into a bit of a wellness fair. We had sports psychologists there. We have physical therapists. We had a wellness group that were able to speak into the kids and build a relationship with the coaches. And then we had tons more of media and activity for the kids to do. And just to see them interact with one another, to know that they're receiving attention to a sport that they love, they devoted their whole lives, to, and these coaches as well. A lot of the, it's an unsung hero. High school soccer is an unsung hero kind of environment for coaches and players that maybe don't get the recognition of being committed to a top college or being a top star in ECNL or going to the big showcases. A lot of these players won't get to do that. But they're still representing their school. They're representing the community. And as we know, especially on the girls' side here, the First Coast is pretty top. So being able to bring awareness to it and seeing the coaches that are going to be your rivals during the season get to interact and network a little bit, and the players as well, to me, it has such an appeal, and it really speaks to the power of sport in our community.
That was one of the things that I really enjoyed about that particular event was that players who play against one another, who maybe don't have, whether it's in club or high school or both, but haven't played with, have spent a lot of time together, but they're kind of pseudo rivals in a way. Got to spend some time personally one-on-one or two or three. We had one shot that I got during of two different schools. The girls representing their schools all together talking, and then I say, you guys want to take a shot? And it's, oh yeah, let's do it all together. They wanted to shoot it all together, so that was great. For me, one of the memorable things, and again, I'm biased in my area that I'm most focused on, which is broadcast, but being able to create those broadcast partnerships and launch a TV show, a radio show, and a podcast, but especially the TV show and the radio show, were particularly important because I think that gave us a platform that most teams around the USL many don't have now. Almost nobody would have it before they started playing, or at least not more than a year in advance of starting playing. And I think that did so much to get the word out about what we were doing locally, but it also put a credibility on what we were doing nationally with folks who follow the USL Championship, USL Super League.
Well, when I love that in our shows, we don't just talk about the USL. Certainly we put a huge emphasis into that, but we bring awareness to what's happening in the community. But we talk soccer in general. So if you're a soccer enthusiast that currently lives in Jacksonville, you're going to have to seek out your own podcasts and your own radios and social medias. But to know that every Tuesday night, when you're driving home, when you're going to play soccer, there's a lot of men's leagues that a lot of adult leagues that happen on Tuesday nights. As you're going to the game or coming back from work or taking your kid to practice around that time or sitting in the car, you can tune in and hear soccer talk for an hour that talks a lot about what our project is. Bringing in guests like UNF men's soccer won the ASUN championship for the first time in a long time. Those are things to be talked about here in our community. And oftentimes, if it weren't for the platforms as you mentioned, we wouldn't be talking about it. How many good stories we have of youth soccer players in this community, not just a performance on the field, an excellence of what they're doing off the field. And so we've created now this platform, and you've created this platform that we get to kind of all enjoy and be a part of as a community that we can bring light into what's happening here, not just in what the USL and Sporting JAX are doing. That's part of it, but everything else that happens by the power of soccer.
By the way, one of those stories you can watch this weekend on the Sporting JAX Report on NBC 12, noon on Saturday, if you're listening to this before then. Otherwise, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. But is the story of the Holiday Cup at Nice. And Fred Hallett's the head coach at Nice, and 4 years ago, he came up with this idea of having a green team, Nice, play against a red team in Creekside around the holidays to get a little Christmas flavor, and then realized, hey, they could help do something more than just a soccer game with this, and now they raise funds and collect goods for the different organizations. Now partner with Ronald McDonald House, Soaring High is a part of this. And so they're impacting the community in a real positive way while also creating a stronger bond between the teams. Because, it's one thing you go out and you play a game during the high school season. You're playing the game. There's whatever bond is forged there for you, against your opponents, limited usually. Well, this is a different situation. And this is really bringing, we talk about wanting to lift the entire community through soccer. Sometimes it's about giving a platform to people who are already doing that. And so for the second year, we're able to put a spotlight on that with our broadcasting platforms.
And I think at times that has more power than kind of creating your own and feeling like you own it and being proprietary to it. If other people are already doing such a good job, yeah, let's go support them. Let's go partner with them, however they see fit, right? Let's not come in and kind of take over and make it our thing. No, continue to make it their thing, but using our platforms as we just mentioned, why not lift it up? And I think another thing worth mentioning is the foundation, right? The start of our foundation that is going to have exactly what you're mentioning. That over time, things like the Holiday Cup and many other outreach programs will kind of come underneath the foundation support system as a grant provider and other means, but to get the foundation going, to be able to have access to soccer in various different parts of the community, the underreached, the underprovided, whatever that might be. I think our foundation is going to have a huge impact in the future of Sporting JAX and the impact that it has in the community.
I can tell you that already since the announcement at UNF, the ticket sales have been churning away. The season tickets are now on sale for the USL Super League 2025-2026 season. Season tickets start as low as $10 per game for students, $12 per game for supporters, and $15 a game for general admission. Premium and field side seating is also available. Just go to sportingjax.com to purchase your season tickets now. And, as we mentioned, you can check out Sporting JAX on TV and radio. Sporting JAX Report, noon Saturdays on NBC 12 before the Premier League coverage. And then every Tuesday at 6, Sporting JAX Soccer Hour on 1010 a.m. You can listen on demand as well at 1010XL.com. All right, let's talk about the Champions League, Mauricio. Winners this week included Liverpool, stayed perfect in the Champions League. Real Madrid, a 3-2 victory over Atalanta with Mbappe, Vinny Jr., and Jude Bellingham all scoring. Leverkusen won over Inter Milan on a 90th minute goal. Aston Villa, 3-2 win over winless Red Bull Leipzig. Atletico Madrid, 3-1 over winless Slovan Bratislava. Griezmann had 2 goals there. Arsenal, 3-0 over AS Monaco. Saka had 2 goals for Arsenal. Barcelona, a 3-2 victory over Dortmund with the 2 goals off the bench by Ferran Torres. Juve knocked off Man City, 2-0. Juve needed that, but that did, positive for Juventus. But, boy, real trouble right now for Man City, who have not had a win in their last 3 in the Champions League. They're at in the 22nd spot right now. So to remind everybody, they got rid of group play in the Champions League, went to league play, where they play in these different against teams from different kind of competition pots. Top 8 qualify automatically for the round of 16. There's one more week of a match week to go here. And teams 9 through 24 have to compete in a 2-legged knockout phase. If you're below 24, 25 to 36, you're eliminated. Is Man City going to get eliminated from Champions League?
Well, right now they're sitting, as you mentioned, in that 22nd slot, which sends them to a playoff game. So then it's going to be a home and away as the number 9 through 24 get reseeded. they'll play, and in a knockout, you never know, right? Even if Man City as the 22nd doesn't really mean anything because, at any given point, they can pull out a win, even though, you
two more match weeks.
Two more matches. That's what I thought. I thought it's 8 match days.
Yeah.
So they play 6. So still plenty of points there for them in 2 matches. But yeah, I don't think we've ever seen not only Man City, but I don't think I can recall a champion of their magnitude having such a bad spell. Typically 2 games here on the spin, 3 games or something like that. But especially with Pep and the quality of players and veterans players that they have, something you should fix itself, you would think. You can't imagine that Rodri being absent is the only reason why they haven't really had a result. I think in 7 matches now.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a tie recently, but no positive results here. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I think the biggest, to me, when you look at the top 8, right, it's easy to kind of look at the bottom and who's not in. But you look at the top 8, first of all, Liverpool continues to just take off. I mean, they're the only undefeated team in the Champions League. Aston Villa, the question is, are they putting too much emphasis in Champions League and not enough in the Prem? Probably not a bad idea for them because Champions League, there's a lot of money the longer you stay in.
Yep.
And if they stay relevant in the Prem towards the spring, I think they'll still give themselves a good chance. But Brest out of France, I mean, it's one of those clubs that you've kind of heard of before. You're not really sure who they are. But for them to be in 7th place and they're 4-1-1, it's pretty impressive when you look at the juggernauts that are outside of it, like Dortmund, Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, Milan, Juventus. And then you have Brest that almost they still have, as we mentioned, 2 weeks, but almost solidified at least a first round bye, but for sure the playoff, the second round playoff game.
By the way, it wasn't that long ago where if I told you Real Madrid, Man City, and PSG, you'd think, oh, champions of Spain and the Premier League in France. They're all in the 20s in the standing of the Champions League right now.
And PSG is on looking out right now.
Yeah. They finally got a result this past week, but they had gone the last 4 before that without. There are some teams, there are some major clubs that are either going to have to play their way in to the knockout round or aren't going to get there altogether, which is remarkable to think. And I wonder how much of that is this new format and how much for Man City, how much of it is just a certain level of performance fatigue. It's hard to stay on top. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and I think for City, performance fatigue is really accumulation of the last several years. And their roster, if you remember, they're under a little bit of investigation for financial fair play.
Yeah.
So if you really think about how their roster build has come along, outside of Haaland, they haven't had a major signing. And every club has at least 1 or 2 kind of big signings. They only brought in really Savinho this year. They brought in Doku last year. But where are the rest of the major signings that they typically splash? So their team, in soccer years, I guess you would say, is a bit of an aging team, more from that fatigue that you're talking about. You have Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne, and they haven't really, and Gundogan, they haven't really refreshed that midfield in a while. And De Bruyne, fortunately for him, arguably the best center midfielder in the world, constantly seems to be, injury prone here and there. So it's not like they're having a healthy squad to be playing with either. And then Rodri out for a significant amount of time. Inconsistency of Phil Foden, inconsistency of Grealish. There's something going on in there, but you look at every team, they have a kind of new blood that comes in. They're smart, and they have the finances to do it. Will they do something in this transfer window here, this winter window, to refresh the squad? Not just by bringing players in. I'm actually wondering if they're going to ship some guys out to kind of see, maybe there's some complacency that kind of took place. I mean, they won 4 in a row, I think, right? Like at one point, and they won the Champions League. They won the treble 2 years ago. Which seems like
forever ago.
Yeah. Kind of once again, short-term memory. What have you done for me lately? Kind of atmosphere. But I'm more interested now what they're going to bring in, but who they're going to ship out because I do think that there's some complacency within the squad.
All right, interesting. We'll follow that. As I mentioned, correct myself. 2 more match weeks, and then the knockout stage playoff, the 2-legged playoff comes up before getting into the knockout stage. So we mentioned earlier about season tickets now on sale. If you're not ready to pull the trigger on season tickets, but you want to just stay in touch with what's happening with Sporting JAX, there is a free membership. You can also put down your season ticket deposits, which are $25 per seat for the USL Super League, $40 per seat for both the Super League and Championship teams. But the membership, free, just go to sportingjax.com. You get discounts on official club merchandise, invitations to insider events, automatic chances to win special prizes and experiences, and get the Sporting JAX email newsletter, and you can place your deposit there as well if you like. All right, let's finish up with the Premier League. Looks like we're not going to be able to hook up with Tony today in his travels, but which Premier League game are you looking forward to the most this weekend?
Well, I think everyone's going to be looking at the Manchester Derby because of the storylines that are around there. Man United seems to be slowly on the climb up with the new management. And then City, I think all eyes are on City to see what's going on there. But I want to keep a close look on Fulham as our adopted local Premier League team, and they're going against Liverpool. Liverpool did not have a good performance, even though they got the result this past week. So I think those two games for me are going to be interesting matchups to look at, but mainly the Manchester Derby.
I want to see Forest and Villa, which is the game that follows us on TV on Saturday. It's 5 versus 6 in the table. 1 goal separates them. That's the only difference in their season results so far. Last year they split with each team winning at home. Forest is coming off a win at Old Trafford. They've won 3 of the last 4 home matches in the Premier League, all of which have been clean sheets. They are a frustrating defense to try to deal with. Villa topped Southampton 1-0 last time out, and as you mentioned, they've had a little more of, they're putting more into the Champions League than they are into the Premier League in terms of player usage and so forth. Not that they're not trying to win, and they've done very well. But I think this is a real interesting matchup because a year or two ago, I think you could say Villa was sort of in the position that Forest is in now, which is trying to reestablish something where they are. And in some regards, this is a bigger step forward for Forest than it was for Villa, that it had some previous better success.
Well, if you remember, Nottingham Forest barely got out of the relegation zone last year, right? I think they ended up finishing 17th, last year. So for them to be where they are now, for us to be having this conversation of 5th versus 6th at this stage in the season, almost midway through the season, it's pretty impressive, and they do look good. They have a really good squad. They have a center back that's been on the come up called Murilo. He's been just called into the Brazil national team. He's kind of quite young. Doesn't have the profile of a traditional center back. He's a little bit shorter, but he's talking, he's fast, he's aggressive. He's a player that Forest will be able to sell in the next couple of years for a lot of money. He's going to be one of the top center backs in the Prem and really in the world.
All right, we'll be keeping an eye on him this weekend. All right, that'll do it. Next week, our final podcast of the calendar year, we will look ahead to 2025. We teased a little bit of it here today, but we're going to look ahead to what's happening in 2025. And it's going to be a big year for Sporting JAX and for soccer fans in Jacksonville. So for the traveling Tony Allegretti and Mauricio Ruiz, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for listening to The Sporting Pod.